Let's continue with the first chapter of class ninth, French Revolution History, the Reign of Terror. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as the Reign of Terror. ठीक है. The the Robespierre followed. Uh, The Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. All those whom he saw as being enemies of the Republic, ex-nobles and clergy, the members of the other political parties, even the members of his own party, who did not agree with his methods were arrested, imprisoned and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, they were guillotined. Guillotined मतलब गला काटना. It is a device which is consisting of the two poles and a blade with which a person is beheaded. It was named after Dr. Guillotin, who invented it. The Robespierre government issued the laws placing a maximum ceiling on the wages and the prices. The meat and the bread were rationed. Peasants were forced to transport their grains to the cities and sell it at the prices fixed by the government. The use of the more expensive white flour was forbidden. All the citizens were required to eat the pain, that is equality bread, a loaf which is made of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to be practiced through the forms of speech and address instead of the traditional monsieur, matlab sir, and madame. All the French men and women were henceforth called citoyen and citoyenne, matlab citizen. The churches were shut down and their buildings were converted into barracks or offices. The Robespierre pursued his policy so relentlessly कि उनके जो supporters थे they also began to demand moderation. Finally, he was convicted by a court. In July 1794, he was arrested and on the next day he was sent to the guillotine. ठीक है. अब देखो लिबर्टी क्या होती है. The revolutionary journalist Camille Desmoulins wrote the following in 1793. He was executed shortly after during the Reign of Terror. Some people believe that liberty is like a child that needs to go through a phase of being disciplined before it attains maturity. Quite the opposite. Liberty is happiness, reason, equality, and justice. It is a declaration of rights. You would like to finish off all your enemies by guillotining them. Has anyone heard of something more senseless? Would it be possible to bring a single person to the scaffold without making 10 more enemies among his relations and friends? On 7th February 1794, Robespierre made a speech at the convention that was then carried by the newspaper Le Montour Universe. Here is an extract from it. To establish and consolidate democracy, to achieve the peaceful rule of the constitution law, we must first finish the war of liberty against tyranny. We must annihilate the enemies of the republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. In the time of revolution, a democratic government may rely on terror. Terror is nothing but justice, swift and severe and inflexible, and is used to meet the most urgent needs of the fatherland. To curb the enemies of the liberty through terror is the right of the founder of republic. ठीक है. फिर देखो क्या हुआ. A directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin. देखो, the revolutionary government sought to mobilize the loyalty of its subjects through various means. One of them was the staging of the festivals like this one. The symbols from the civilizations of the ancient of the ancient Greece and the Rome were used to convey the aura of a hallowed history. The pavilion on the raised platform in the middle, carried by the classical columns, was made of perishable material that could be dismantled. Describe the groups of the people and their clothes, and their roles and the actions. The impressions of a revolutionary festival does this image convey. A directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize the power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to the non-propertied sections of the society. It provided for the two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of the power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the Directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of the freedom, of equality before the law, and fraternity remained inspiring, ideals that motivated political movements in the France and the rest of Europe during the following century. ठीक है. फिर फिर देखो क्या था कि डिड द वुमेन हैव अ रेवोल्यूशन. औरतों का था. द पैरिसियन वुमेन ऑन द वे टू वर्सेल्स. When a precipitation of the when women marched to Versailles and brought the king back with them to Paris. From the very beginning, the women were the active participants in the events that brought about so many important changes in the French society. They hoped that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce the measures to improve their lives. Most women of the third estate had to work for a living. They worked as a seamstresses or the laundresses, sold flowers, fruits, and villages at the market, or were employed as the domestic servants in the houses of the prosperous people. Most women did not have the access to education or the job training. Only the daughters of the nobles or the wealthier members of the third estate could study at a convent, after which their families arranged a marriage for them. The working women had also to care for the families, that is, cook, fetch water, queue up for the bread, and look after the children. Their wages were lower than those of men. In order to discuss and voice their interests, women started their own political clubs and newspapers. About 60 women clubs came up in its different French cities. The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous of them. One of their main demands was that the women enjoy the same political rights as men. The women were disappointed that Constitution of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. They demanded the right to vote, to be elected to the assembly, and to hold the political office. Only then, they felt, would their interests be represented in the new government. In the early years, the revolutionary government did introduce the laws that helped improve the lives of women. Together with the creation of state schools, the schooling was made compulsory for all the girls. Their father could no longer force them into marriages against their will. Marriage was made into a contract entered into freely and registered under the civil law. The divorce was made legal and could be applied for by both women and men. Women could now train for jobs. They could become artists or run small business. Women's struggle for the equal political rights, however, continued. During the reign of terror, the new government issued the laws ordering closure of the women's club and banning their political activities. Many prominent women were arrested and the number of them executed. Women's movement for the voting rights and the equal villages continued through the next 200 years in many countries of the world. The fight for the vote was carried out through an international suffrage movement during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The example of a political activities of the French women during the revolutionary years was kept alive as an inspiring memory. It was finally in 1946 that the women in the France won the right to vote. The life of a revolutionary woman, Olympie de Gouges, 1748-1793. Olympie de Gouges was one of the most important of the politically active women in the revolutionary France. She protested against the constitution and the declaration of man and citizen, as they excluded women from basic rights that each human being was entitled to. So in 1791 she wrote a declaration of the rights of women and citizen, which she addressed to the Queen and to the members of National Assembly, demanded that they act upon it. In 1793, Olympie de Gouges criticized the Jacobean government for forcibly closing down the Women Club. She was tried by the National Convention, which charged her with the treason. Soon after this, she was executed. Some of the basic rights set forth in Olympie de Gouges' declaration: woman is born free and remains equal to men in rights. The goal of all political association is the preservation of natural rights of women and men. These rights are the liberty, prosperity, security, and above all, resistance to oppression. The sources of all sovereignty resides in the nation, which is nothing but the union of woman and man. The law should be the expression of the general will. All female and male citizens should have a say, either personally or by the representatives in its formulation. It should be the same for all. All female and male citizens are equally entitled to all the honors and the public employment according to their abilities and without any other distinction than that of their talent. No woman is an exception. She is accused, arrested, and detained in the cases determined by law. Women, like men, obey this rigorous law. ठीक है. In 1793, the Jacobin politician Chaumette sought to justify the closure of Women Club on the following grounds. फिर आता है abolition of slavery. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of the slavery in the French colonies. The colonies in the Caribbean, Martinique, the Guadeloupe, Guadeloupe, and Saint Domingo were the important suppliers of the commodity like tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. But the reluctance of the Europeans to go and work in the distant and the unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantation. So this was met by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and Americas. The slave trade began in the 17th century. The French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast, where they brought the sails from the local chieftains, the branded and the shackled. The slaves were packed tightly into the ships for the 3-month long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There they were sold to the plantation owners. The exploitation of the slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. The port cities like the Bordeaux and the Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. Throughout the 18th century, there was little criticism of slavery in France. The National Assembly held long debates about whether the rights of the men should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies, but it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from the businessmen whose incomes depended on the slave trade. It was finally the convention which in 1794 legislated to free all the slaves in the French overseas possessions. This, however, turned out to be a short-term measure. 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. The plantation owners understood the freedom as including the right to enslave African Negroes in pursuit of their economic interest. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. फिर देखो क्या है. The French women prepared to civilize the African American Indian slaves by giving them European clothes to wear. Negroes क्या है is a term used for indigenous people of Africa south of the Sahara. It is a derogatory term not in common use any longer. Emancipation is the act of freeing. फिर देखो क्या आता है. फिर रेवोल्यूशन एंड एवरीडे लाइफ है ना. Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak, on the books they read? The years following 1789 in France saw many such changes in the lives of the men, women, and children. The revolutionary governments took it upon themselves to pass laws that would translate the ideas of the liberty and equality into everyday practice. One important law that came into effect soon after the storming of the Bastille in the summer of 1789 was the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all the written material and culture activities, the books, newspapers, plays, could be published or performed only after they had been approved by the censors of the king. ठीक है फिर now the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and the Citizen proclaimed freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. Newspapers, the pamphlets, the books, and the printed pictures flooded the towns of France from where they traveled rapidly into the countryside. They all described and discussed the events and the changes taking place in France. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of the events could be expressed. Each side ought to convince the others of its position through the medium of the print. Plays, songs, and festive processions attracted large numbers of the people. This was one way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice that political philosophers wrote about at length in text which only a handful of the educated people could read. ठीक है फिर देखो क्या हुआ था फिर ये MARAT Marat addressing the people painting by Louis Leopold Boilly कंक्लूजन क्या निकला देखो इन 1804 नेपोलियन बोनापार्टे crowned himself as the emperor of the France. He sent out he set out to conquer the neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as protection of the private property and a uniform system of weights and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring the freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Many of his measures that carried the revolutionary ideas of liberty and the modern laws to other parts of the Europe had an impact on the people long after Napoleon had left. The ideas of the liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. These spread from France to the rest of the Europe during the 19th century where the feudal systems were abolished. The colonized people reworked the idea of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign nation state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy were the two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from the revolutionary France. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy. Napoleon crossing the Alps, painting by David. ठीक है Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one of those who was inspired by the new ideas that were spreading through Europe at that time. The French Revolution, later the July Revolution, excited his imagination. He could think and talk of nothing else when he heard of the July Revolution in France in 1830. On his way to England at Cape Town, he insisted on visiting frigates, warships flying the revolutionary tricolour flag, though he had been temporarily lamed by an incident. So that's all for the first chapter. We will continue with the chapter 2. ठीक है अब हम लोग चैप्टर 2 पढ़ते हैं चैप्टर 2 क्या है सोशलिज्म इन द यूरोप एंड द रशियन रेवोल्यूशन ठीक है Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. The socialism in the Europe and the Russian Revolution. uh, अरे यार, कहाँ चला गया? hmm. The age of social change. In the previous chapter, you read about the powerful ideas of the freedom and equality that circulated in Europe after the French Revolution. The French Revolution opened up the possibility of creating a dramatic change in the way in which society was structured. As you have read, before the 18th century, society was broadly divided into estates and orders, and it was the aristocracy and the church which controlled economic and social power. Suddenly, after the revolution, it seemed possible to change this. In many parts of the world, including the Europe and Asia, the new ideas about the individual rights and who controls social power began to be discussed. In India, the Raja Rammohan Rai and Deroz Yu talked of the significance of the French Revolution, and many others debated the ideas of the post revolutionary Europe. The developments in the colonies, in turn, reshaped these ideas of societal change. Not everyone in Europe, however, wanted a complete transformation of society. Responses varied from those who accepted that some change was necessary but wished for a gradual shift to those who wanted to restructure society radically. Some were conservatives, others were liberals or radicals. What did these terms really mean in the context of the time? What separated these trends of politics and what linked them together? We must remember that all these terms do not mean the same thing in all contexts or at all times. We will look briefly at some of the important political traditions of the 19th century and see how they influence change. Then we will focus on one historical event in which there was an attempt at a radical transformation of society. Through the revolution in Russia, socialism became one of the most significant and powerful ideas to shape society in the 20th century. The liberals, radicals, and conservatives. One of the groups which looked to change society were the liberals. Liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all religions. We should remember that at this time, European states especially discriminated in favor of one religion or another. Britain favored the Church of England, Austria and Spain favored the Catholic Church. Liberals also opposed the uncontrolled power of dynastic rulers. They wanted to safeguard the rights of individuals against governments. They argued for a representative elected parliamentary government subject to the laws interpreted by a well trained judiciary that was independent of the rulers and officials. However, they were not Democrats. They did not believe in universal adult franchise, that is, the right of every citizen to vote. They felt man of property mainly should have the vote. They also did not want the vote for women. In the contrast, the radicals wanted a nation in which government was based on the majority of a country's population. Many supported women's suffragette movements. Unlike liberals, they opposed the privileges of the great landowners and wealthy factory owners. They were not against the existence of private property, but disliked the concentration of the property in the hands of a few. The conservatives were opposed to the radicals and the liberals. After the French Revolution, however, even conservatives had opened their minds to the need for change. Earlier in the 18th century, the conservatives had been generally opposed to the idea of change. By the 19th century, they accepted that some change was inevitable but believed that the past had to be respected and change had to be brought about through a slow process. Such differing ideas about societal change clashed during the social and political turmoil that followed the French Revolution. The various attempts at the revolution and the natural transformation in the 19th century helped define both the limits and the potential of these political tendencies. अच्छा, सुफ्रागेती मूवमेंट क्या होता है? अ मूवमेंट टू गिव वुमेन द राइट टू वोट. ठीक है. फिर क्या था? सच डिफरेंट आइडियाज़ अबाउट सोशल चेंज clashed during social and political turmoil that followed the French Revolution. The various attempts at revolution and national transformation in the 19th century helped define both the limits and potential of these political tendencies. ठीक है. Industrial society and the social change. These political trends were the signs of a new time. It was a time of profound social and economic changes. It was a time when the new cities came up and the new industrialized regions developed. The railways expanded and the industrial revolution occurred. Industrialization brought men, women, and children to factories. Work hours were often long and wages were poor. Unemployment was common, particularly during the times of low demand for industrial goods. Housing and sanitation were the problems since towns were growing rapidly. The liberals and radicals searched for solutions to these issues. ठीक है. फिर London poor in the mid 19th century as seen by a contemporary. फिर क्या हुआ देखो. Almost all the industries were the property of individuals. Liberals and radicals themselves were often property owners and employers. Having made their wealth through trade or industrial ventures, they felt that such efforts should be encouraged, that its benefits would be achieved if the workforce in the economy was healthy and citizens were educated. Opposed to the privileges the old aristocracy had by birth, they firmly believed in the value of individual effort, labor, and enterprise. If the freedom of individuals was ensured, if the poor could labor and those with capital could operate without restraint, they believed that society would develop. Many working men and women who wanted changes in the world rallied around liberal and radical groups and parties in the early 19th century. Some nationalists, liberals, and radicals wanted revolutions to put an end to the kind of governments established in Europe in 1815. In France, Italy, Germany, and Russia, they became revolutionaries and worked to overthrow the existing monarch. Nationalists talked of revolutions that would create nations where all the citizens would have equal rights. After 1815, the Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian nationalist, conspired with others to achieve this in Italy. The nationalists elsewhere, including India, read his writings. The coming of socialism to Europe. Perhaps one of the most far reaching versions of how society should be structured was socialism. By the mid 19th century in Europe, socialism was a well known body of ideas that attracted widespread attention. Socialists were against the private property and saw it as a root of all social ills of the time. Why? Individuals owned the property that gave employment, but the proprieted were concerned only with the personal gain and not with the welfare of those who were who were made who made the property productive. So if society as a whole rather than single individuals controlled property, more attention would be paid to collective social interest. Socialists wanted this change and campaigned for it. How could a society without property operate? What would be the basis of a socialist society? Socialists had the different versions of the future. Hmm. Of the future. Some believed in the idea of cooperatives. Robert Owen, 1771 1858, a leading English manufacturer, sought to build a cooperative community called New Harmony in Indiana, USA. Other socialists felt that cooperatives could not be built on a wide scale only through individual initiative. They demanded the government to encourage cooperatives. In France, for instance, Louis Blanc, 1813 to 1882, wanted the government to encourage cooperatives and replace the capitalist enterprises. And these cooperatives were to be associations of the people who produced the goods together and divided the profits according to the work done by members. Karl Marx, 1818-1883, and Friedrich Engels, 1820-1895, added other ideas to this body of arguments. Marx argued that the industrial society was capitalist. Capitalists owned the capital invested in factories, and the profit of capitalist was produced by the workers. The condition of the workers could not improve as long as this profit was accumulated by the private capitalist. The workers had to overthrow the capitalism and the rule of private property. The Marx believed that to free themselves from the capitalist exploitation, workers had to construct a radically socialist society where all the property was socially controlled, and this would be a communist society. He was convinced that the workers would triumph in their conflict with capitalists. A communist society was a natural society of the future. The support for socialism. By the 1870s, socialist ideas spread through Europe. To coordinate their efforts, the socialists formed an international body, namely the Second International, where the workers in the England and Germany began forming associations to fight for better living and working conditions. They set up the fund to help the members in the times of distress and demanded a reduction of working hours and the right to vote. In Germany, these associations worked closely with the Social Democratic Party and helped it win parliamentary seats. By 1905, the Socialists and the Trade Union formed a Labour Party in Britain and a Socialist Party in France. However, till 1914, Socialists never succeeded in forming a government in Europe. Represented by the strong figures in the parliamentary politics, their ideas did shape legislation, but the governments continued to be run by conservatives, liberals, and radicals. Uh, this is a painting of the Paris Commune of 1871. It portrays a scene from the popular uprising in Paris. In Paris between March and May 1871. This was a period when the town council, the Commune of Paris, was taken over by a people's government consisting of worker, ordinary people, professional, political activities, and others. The uprising emerged against a background uh, of the growing discontent against the policies of the French state. The Paris Commune was ultimately crushed by the government troops, but it was celebrated by socialists the world over as a prelude to a socialist revolution. The Paris Commune is also popularly remembered for the two important legacies: one for its association with the workers, a red flag that was the flag adopted by the communards, and the revolutionaries in the Paris, two for the Marseillaise. Originally written as a war song in 1792, it became a symbol of the Commune and of the struggle for liberty. The Russian Revolution. In one of the least industrialized of the European states, this situation was reversed. The socialists took over the government in Russia through the October Revolution of 1917, the fall of monarchy in February 1917, and the events of the October are normally called the Russian Revolution. How did this come about? What were the social political conditions in Russia when the revolution occurred? To answer these questions, let us look at Russia a few years before the revolution. The Tsar Nicholas II in the White Hall of the Winter Palace, St. Petersburg. The Russian Empire in 1914. In 1914, the Tsar Nicholas II ruled Russia and its empire, and besides the territory around Moscow, the Russian Empire uh, कहाँ चला गया हाँ the Russian Empire included the current day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the parts of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus. It is stretched to the Pacific and comprised today Central Asian states as well as Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The majority religion was Russian Orthodox Christianity that had grown out of the Greek Orthodox Church, but the empire also included Catholic, Protestant, Muslims, and the Buddhist. ठीक है तो फिर क्या हुआ देखो फिर ये हुआ इकोनॉमी एंड सोसाइटी फिर at the beginning of the 20th century, the vast majority of the Russian people were agriculturalists. About 85% of the Russian Empire population earned their living from agriculture. This proportion was higher than in the most European countries. For instance, in the France and Germany, the proportion was between 40% and the 50%. In the empire, the cultivators produced for the market as well as for their own needs, and Russia was a major exporter of the grain. ठीक है अब देखो अनएम्प्लॉयड पीजेंट्स हैं इन द प्री वॉर सेंट पीटर्सबर्ग मैनी सर्वाइव बाय ईटिंग एट चैरिटेबल किचन्स एंड लिविंग इन पुअर हाउसेस the workers sleeping in the bunkers in the dormitory in the pre-revolutionary Russia. They slept in the shifts and could not keep their families with them. ठीक है तो industry was found in the pockets. The prominent industrial area were the St. Petersburg and Moscow. The craftsmen undertook much of the production, but the large factories existed alongside the craft workshops. Many factories were set up in the 1890s when the Russia railway network was extended and the foreign investment in the industry increased. The coal production doubled and the iron and the steel output quadrupled. By the 1900s, in some areas, the factory workers and the craftsmen were almost equal in number. The most industry was a private property of the industrialists. The government supervised the large factories to ensure the minimum wages and limited hours of the work, but factory inspectors could not prevent the rules being broken. In the craft units and the small workshops, a working day was sometimes 15 hours compared with 12 or 10 or 12 hours in factories. Accommodation varied from the rooms to the dormitories. Workers were a divided social group. Some had a strong link with the village from which they came, others had settled in the cities permanently. The workers were divided by skill. A metal worker of St. Petersburg recalled metal workers considered themselves aristocrats among other workers. Their occupation demanded more training and skill. Women made up 31% of the factory labor force by 1914, but they were paid less than men, between half and three quarters of a man's wage. Divisions among the workers showed themselves in the dress and manners too. Some workers formed associations to help members in the times of unemployment or financial hardships, but such associations were few. Despite divisions, the workers did unite to strike. The work stopped work when they disagreed with the employers about the dismissals or the work conditions. These strikes took place frequently in the textile industry during 1896 to 1897 and in the metal industry during 1902. In the countryside, the peasants cultivated most of the land, but the nobility, the crown, and the Orthodox Church owned the large properties. Like the workers, the peasants too were divided. They were also deeply religious. But except in a few cases, they had no respect for the nobility. The nobles got the power and position through their services to the Tsar, not through the local popularity. This was unlike France, where during the French Revolution in Brittany, the peasants respected nobles and fought for them. In Russia, the peasants wanted the land of the nobles to be given to them. Frequently, they refused to pay the rent and even murdered the landlords. In the 1902, this occurred on a large scale in South Russia, and in 1905, such incidents took place all over Russia. The Russian peasants were differed from the other European peasants in another way. They pooled their land together periodically and they commune, mir, divided it according to the needs of the individual families. ठीक है. अब देखो, Alexander Shiapnikov, a socialist worker of the time, gives us a description of how the meetings were organized. The propaganda was done in the plants and shops on an individual basis. There were also discussion circles. The legal meetings took place on the matters concerning official issues, but this activity was skillfully integrated into the general struggle for the liberation of the working class. Illegal meetings were arranged on the spur of the moment, but in an organized way during the lunch and the evening break in front of the exit, in the yard, or in establishment with the several floors on the stairs. The most alert workers would form a plug in the doorway and the whole mass piled up in the exit. An agitator would get up right there on the spot. Management would contact the policeman on the telephone, but the speeches would have already been made and the necessary decisions been taken by the time they arrived. The socialism in Russia. All the political parties were illegal in Russia before 1914. The Russian the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party was founded in 1898 by the socialists who respected the Marx ideas. However, because of the government policy, it had to operate as an illegal organization. It set up a newspaper, mobilized the workers, and organized the strikes. Some Russian socialists felt that the Russian peasant custom of dividing the land periodically made them the natural socialist. So the peasants, not the workers, would be the main force of the revolution, and Russia could become socialist more quickly than other countries. The socialists were active in the countryside through the late 19th century. They formed the Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900. This party struggled for the peasants' right and demanded that the land belonging to the nobles be transferred to the peasant. Social Democrats disagreed with the socialist revolutionaries about the peasant. Lenin felt that the peasants were not the one united group. Some were poor and others rich. Some worked as laborers while others were capitalists who employed workers. Given this differentiation within them, they could not all be the part of the socialist movement. The party was divided over the strategy of organization. The Vladimir Lenin, who led the Bolshevik group, thought that in a representative society like the Tsarist Russia, the party should be disciplined and should control the number and quality of its members. Others, the Mensheviks, thought that the party should be open to all as in Germany. A turbulent time, the 1905 revolution. Russia was an autocracy. Unlike other European rulers, even at the beginning of 20th century, the Tsar was not subject to the parliament. Liberals in the Russia campaigned to end this state of affairs. Together with the Social Democrats and the Socialist Revolutionaries, they worked with the peasants and the workers during the Revolution of 1905 to demand a constitution. They were supported in the empire by the nationalists in the Poland, for instance, and in Muslim-dominated areas by the Jihadists who wanted modernized Islam to lead their societies. The year 1904 was a particularly bad one for Russian workers. The prices of essential goods rose so quickly that the real wages declined by 20%. The membership of the Workers' Association rose dramatically. When the four members of the Assembly of the Russian Workers, which had been formed in 1904, were dismissed at the Putin of Iron Works, there was a call for the industrial action. Over the next few days, over the 110,000 workers in the St. Petersburg went on strike, demanding a reduction in the working day to 8 hours, an increase in the wages, and improvement in working conditions. When the processions of the workers led by Father Gapon, Gapon, reached the Winter Palace, it was attacked by the police and the Cossacks. Over 100 workers were killed and about 300 wounded. The incident known as the Bloody Sunday started a series of events that became known as the 1905 Revolution. Strikes took place all over the country and universities closed down when the students' body staged walkouts complaining about the lack of civil liberties. Lawyers, doctors, engineers, and other middle class workers established the Union of Unions and demanded a constituent assembly. During the 1905 revolution, the Tassar allowed the creation of an elected consultative parliament or Duma. For a brief while during the revolution, there existed a large number of trade unions and the factory committees made up of factory workers. After 1905, most committees and the unions worked unofficially since they were declared illegal. Severe restrictions were placed on the political activity. The Tassar dismissed the first Duma within 75 days and the re-elected second Duma within 3 months. He did not want any questioning of his authority or any reduction in his power. He changed the voting laws and packed the third Duma with conservative politicians. The liberals and the revolutionaries were kept out. The First World War and the Russian Empire. In 1914, the war broke out between the two European alliances, Germany, Austria, and Turkey, the Central Powers, and the France, Britain, and Russia, later Italy and Romania. Each country had a global empire, and the war was fought outside the Europe as well as in Europe, and this was the First World War. अब देखो ये जदादिस्ट क्या होते हैं? मुस्लिम रिफॉर्मर्स विद इन द रशियन एम्पायर. रियल वेज क्या होता है? रिफ्लेक्ट्स द क्वांटिटीज ऑफ द गुड्स विच द वेजेस वर एक्चुअली बाइंग. In Russia, this war was initially popular and the people rallied around the Tsar Nicholas II. As the war continued, though, the Tsar refused to consult the main parties in the Duma. Support war thin, anti-German sentiments ran high, as can be seen in the renaming of the St. Petersburg, a German name, as Petrograd. The Tsarina Alexander German origins and the poor advisors, especially a monk called Rasputin, made the autocracy unpopular. The First World War on the Eastern Front differed from that on the Western Front. In the West, the armies fought from the trenches stretched along the eastern France. In the East, armies moved a great deal and fought the battles, leaving the large casualties. The defeats were shocking and demoralizing. Russia's army lost badly in Germany and Austria between 1914 and 1916. There were over 7 million casualties by 1917. As they retreated, the Russian army destroyed the crops and buildings to prevent the enemy from being able to live off the land. The destruction of the crops and buildings led to over 3 million refugees in the Russia. The situation discredited the government and the Tsar soldiers did not wish to fight such a war. The war also had a severe impact on the industry. Russian-owned industries were few in number, and the country was cut off from the other supplies of the industrial goods by the German control of the Baltic Sea. Industrial equipment disintegrated more rapidly in Russia than elsewhere in Europe. By 1916, the railway lines began to break down. The able-bodied men were called up to the war. As a result, there were labor shortage and small workshops producing incisions were shut down. The last supplies of the grain were sent to feed the army. For the people in the cities, bread and flour became scarce. By the winters of 1916, the riots at the bread shops were common. Russian soldiers during the First World War. The Imperial Russian Army came to be known as the Russian Steamroller. It was the largest armed forces in the world. When this army shifted its loyalty and began supporting the revolutionaries, the Tsarist power collapsed. Tsarist. Tsarist power collapsed. The February Revolution in Petrograd. We will continue in the next video. Thank you.